Hey there, I'm Stephan Kesting, and this is the Grapple Arts Radio Podcast. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk Jiu-Jitsu, but we're going to talk old school Jiu-Jitsu and new school Jiu-Jitsu, MMA. It's going to go from Theodore Roosevelt to modern day MMA to, I hope, fighting techniques of the Indian tribes on the plains, because I've got Daniele Bolelli with me here today. And Daniele, if you don't know, has got one of my favorite podcasts, History on Fire. It's fantastic. If you're into history, if you're into sort of the action, the macro and the micro things that have happened in history, it's just absolutely fantastic. And you pick great topics. They're totally clickbaity, but then they keep your attention. So
thanks, man. First
of all, thanks for those.
Much appreciated, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Why don't we jump right into it?
Yeah.
Let's get to a podcast that you did a little while ago on Theodore Roosevelt. Now, I'd seen pictures or I'd heard references to Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, training in judo/jiu-jitsu. Yeah. But why don't you tell us about this a little bit? Like, sure. He trained here in North America.
Yeah, he was kind of a wild guy. I think it's because he grew up in this super wealthy family, in this very cozy environment, but also facing a lot of hardship as a kid, because he had all sorts of problems. He had a very severe asthma at a time when they didn't really figure out how to treat asthma, where you could actually die from it. Their idea of treating asthma back then was to give you giant cigars to smoke as a kid.
To open up the lungs.
Excellent. That was the idea. So yeah, probably not the best remedy ever. But so he grew up with this sense of being frail, being weak. It's kind of almost the classic martial artist story, right? Mm-hmm. There's that tale of empowerment, that because you feel that you're lacking, you feel that I need a path, something that gives me the tools to reshape myself.
Yeah, there's a similar story arc as Helio Gracie and I believe Moreira, the founder of Aikido.
Totally. It's I think there's a reason why certain people gravitate toward martial arts, and that's one of the big ones. And I think in his case, so once he figured, okay, I'm either gonna die or I'm gonna make it, he started going hardcore, lifting weights, training boxing, wrestling. He was never particularly great at any of them, but what everybody remarked was that he had some serious willpower, so what he lacked in finesse or natural athleticism, he made up in just toughness. Mm-hmm. And so when he did get to be president of the United States and he had the right hookups internationally in conversation with Japan, he was like, hey, I heard about judo, jiu-jitsu, whatever the hell you guys call it. Mm-hmm. I want to do it. Can you send me somebody? And they sent him. Yamashita was one of the gods of judo at the time. I think very first 10th dan in judo, to become his instructor for, I think, a little less than a year or something. And so Roosevelt, William Taft will become president after him, was one of his training partners. A few other guys were just training judo with Yamashita at a time when nobody knew what judo was in US, basically. It was like 1900 something, like way, way early on.
So they had mats in the White House.
Yeah. They laid down tatami at the bottom, and that was that.
And do you know how long he did it for?
I think, if I remember correctly, it was like 6 months, 9 months, something like that. And partially also...
But he had a wrestling background.
Oh, yeah. He wrestled. When he was governor of New York, in fact, he said, okay, get rid of this billiard table. I don't need the pool table, but I want wrestling mats right here. And he was always wrestling with pretty much anybody would show up, whether willing or unwilling. It was secondary. It was kind of like, come on, get on the mat with me. And he would just throw them around and... Yeah, pretty wild guy, that's for sure. Part of the reason why he switched even more to wrestling and judo is because he sparred so hard that while he was president, he got hit with a giant right cross that took out vision from one of his eyes. He became blind in one of his eyes because he was going... their idea of mellow sparring wasn't quite there yet. Mm-hmm. So eventually realized, okay, I really can't train boxing anymore because I only have one eye left.
Yes.
But I'll stick to grappling for a while.
Well, I wonder what happened to the other guy for blinding the president. We don't know who it is, actually.
No,
there's a shallow grave somewhere out on the plains.
Exactly.
Well, I wonder if there's been any judo or jiu-jitsu in the White House since.
I know. That's actually a really,
I can't think of anybody, but you'd be perhaps more in touch with that than I.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody who would be a good candidate for, who wasn't? No, I can't think of anybody.
Yeah. But it's funny, this whole drive for self-improvement through martial arts, there, as you point out, it is one of the sort of fundamental storylines of, weak, sickly child, drives himself. It's just really a series of progressive challenges and using that as a crucible for self-improvement. I suppose some people do that by, by running. Some people do that by, fasting.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think there are 10,000 ways to do it, because I think in that sense it's almost the Zen idea that everything can become an art, meaning a tool for self-improvement that is not just about what you're doing, but is the process of doing it is about shaping yourself. For me, I can see the appeal of martial arts on a different level just because nothing deals with conflict the way the
conflict does.
Well, but
conflict deals with conflict.
It's like there's a very clear ritualized element in martial art. You play football. There's conflict there. It's hardcore. It's physical. But there's kind of this secondary ritual that in theory is not about conflict. It's throwing a ball, catching it, doing. Martial arts strips all the other stuff and it's like one man against another, go. There's no chasing a ball as a justification. There's none of the other things. It's just very kind of raw and primal to some degree. Yeah.
I mean, we've been doing this ever since we climbed down from the trees.
Exactly.
Probably before.
Even the trees. Yeah, exactly.
In the trees.
Yeah.
And monkeys do some pretty terrible things to each other.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Just coming down to the ground hasn't really changed that.
No.
So, you're a martial artist. Tell us a little bit about your martial arts background.
I started out, I think I watched Star Wars one too many times. So I started out with this very romanticized idea of martial art, right? I always wanted to find Master Yoda who teach me the way of the Force and that kind of thing.
Useful.
Yeah.
If you have an X-Wing stuck in a swamp, you want a Yoda,
Yeah, you want to be able to... And so I started out first with Chinese martial arts. I did Tai Chi, and then progressively I realized it's kind of funny because usually the parable you see is people who get into it for this very muscle-driven, tough thing, and then they mellow out in time and they start doing more mellow things. I had the exact opposite direction. I started out, this mellow kind of way, and then I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but...
Let's amp it up a little bit.
Switching a little more toward a self-defense emphasis. And even then I was like, yeah, that's switch, but you can never really go full on. So then it became all combat sports after that. And so it was all the,
So what were some of the rabbit holes that you went down? I'll call Tai Chi a rabbit hole and I'll get spammed here by angry Tai Chi people.
There was one thing that it's interesting because I can't say that I dislike it, even though I see 10,000 limitations. There was this one style of Kung Fu that I was doing that was kind of a bit unorthodox for a lot of Chinese martial arts because it's very much based on this idea that once you get all the basics down, the way you train is somebody attack you. They don't tell you how. There's no prearranged punch, kick, grab, or whatever. Then you do have prearranged roles because it's a self-defense scenario. You're using all the techniques you can do in sports, but it's made a little more spontaneous. So the attack comes and you have to react. And at that point, they go with you. They stop giving you a resistance at that point and they kind of flow with you. And I found it useful in terms of mental flexibility. It's obviously lacking the realism of combat sports in terms of adrenaline, the timing is different, everything is different, right? So clearly lacking something. But on the other hand, what I sometimes find lacking in combat sports is just the basic common sense that fighting with no rules is a very different game than fighting with rules.
Right.
And even though, I would train 80-90% time in combat sports, but have a little bit of that self-defense aspect just to get... I see people get into fights and they do even train martial artists sometimes do the dumb best shit where it's like, are you kidding me? It's like that shot is right there and you're not taking it because you don't think that of as a legitimate target.
Right.
So to me, just doing a tiny bit of something else, that's why I don't regret that experience. I'm glad I did it even for a long time. Even though today, if you tell me where do you want to put the bulk of my training would be overwhelmingly combat sports, but with a little bit of this. So that was actually kind of fun. And then I started switching to Jujutsu, Judo, boxing, MMA, some wrestling. Wrestling was great. I suck at wrestling, but I love it. It was awesome.
It's funny. I was just on some reading some internet thread, and the argument was essentially, yes, if you were against a boxer, you would just put your thumb in his eye. And the person's response had a lot of 4-letter words, but basically it was like, you think that you can put your thumb in a boxer's eye when he's got incredible speed, incredible accuracy. And if he wants to use all that accuracy and use all that speed to put his thumb in your eye, guess who's going to win?
Than you can, of course.
Yeah.
No, and in fact, that's why I think is good to have both. Because what typically happens is the guys who are 412 pounds and say, I'll just put a thumb in my eye. It's like, yeah, good luck. Because you lack all the elements to actually make that idea work in reality. Then the other thing I see is people who are physical specimens who have all the attributes don't have that thing that make them go, oh, there's a different target. I shouldn't just punch him in the jaw with my closed fist when I don't have gloves, breaking my hand. Maybe I should do something that's a little more tailored to a no-rule scenario.
Yes.
And it's so easy because, the hard part is doing what combat sports do, develop all those attributes. That takes a lot of work.
The timing, the speed, the explosiveness.
Totally. That's the really hard part. Yeah. The easy part is pick up the little tricks.
Right.
That's like 10% of your time. But you need to put 10%. If you have 0%, it's still not going to click. Like
you're building, this is a tortured analogy, you're building the big missile.
Yeah.
But then you can swap out the payload,
exactly.
the warhead that goes on the top of it. Today I'll put my Jujutsu payload on there. Today I'll put my throat rip, carotid artery biting payload on there.
You see that even in when you train Jiu-Jitsu and if you are going nice with somebody, but you say, okay, let's throw in some strikes.
Right.
Gentle. Okay, just gentle, open hand, just tap each other, nothing big. A lot of people Jiu-Jitsu, and they are great, it goes out the window because they are not used to it. Now, it's going to take them no time to get used to it because if you're good at Jiu-Jitsu, it's really not going to take you much to actually get that.
Yeah, after one punch in the face, you realize the overhook's actually kind of sort of important.
Exactly. It's like things like that. So it's not that, oh my God, this whole other thing that you had no idea about, open side. But you need to do it a little,
And hopefully you do it in the club and not in your first ever fight on the street.
Exactly. So that's, I think, is my thing. Is overwhelmingly, I think combat sports are the way to go. But I would add a tiny bit that typically most combat sports don't emphasize.
Okay, so now you've done Kung Fu. I've done Kung Fu back in my foolish younger teenage years. But I was really serious about it. I really wanted to get good at that stuff. Yeah. I spent an inordinate amount of time training it. And I just put out something about there being a martial art being the techniques, the training methods, and the training equipment, and all three are important.
Yeah.
So the part that I'm confused about, and the part that maybe you get your historian's sense on, is what the hell happened to the training methods of all these martial arts? We've got 10,000 systems of Kung Fu.
Yeah.
They are all most of them are hopping around. Most of them suck. Yeah. There you have a historian's official assessment. Most of them suck. And it's mostly, I think, because of the training method that you're standing there doing your form, your kata, or whatever you call it in your particular system, over and over and over, and you're perfecting, in air quotes, monkey steals the peaches on the air.
Right.
So presumably, once upon a time, these things must have been effective vehicles for actually beating the crap out of somebody.
Totally. I think that's, you nailed it, because there were even those times, like in the 70s or 80s, where you had like Kung Fu guys and Muay Thai guys going at it with rules very permissive, where they would favor the Kung Fu guys and they would still get their ass kicked.
Yes.
Not because they lacked the techniques. They were doing some of the same techniques, but the methodology of teaching was completely different, and the Thai had it way better. I think what happens is in Chinese history, there are a couple of things that contribute to this. One, there's this old tradition of secrecy that's really annoying, but, I can see the logic. Their idea was, if everybody's training the same thing and I have my weird techniques that nobody has seen, the first time I do them, I'm gonna get you. And I don't need to do them a second time because we're not playing this game. It's like, so I don't want to give away my secrets. I want to keep it closed door, only the people I trust. But of course, that's the way the systems die.
Yeah. So now you spend a year standing in a horse stance in front of your master's school.
While they check you out to see, do I like this guy? Do I trust him enough? So you get that part where they did not teach very freely at all. So inevitably the number of people who got the goods was fairly limited. Plus then you had the whole period of, in Chinese history, a bunch of times you had what start as this martial arts oriented group. They become vehicles for rebellions against the government.
The Boxer Rebellion, for example.
Exactly. So not surprisingly, several governments and definitely communism started cracking down real heavy on martial arts organization, where the idea was you teach a wushu version of whatever you are teaching, flowery forms, whatever, but let's strip all the combat stuff away from it.
Is that why they cracked down on the Falun Gong people? Like it's more of a qigong.
Yeah, but there's still that, that's always how it, there's always this organization that get out. They have the cover of where a martial art group, where a
spiritual group,
and it often ends up being a powerful organization that the government would be scared of.
Okay.
So their thing is like, let's nip it in the bud. And part of it was cracking down on the way we'll do martial arts is for health and for performance, meaning like look good, aesthetic performance. Combat, out the window. Yeah. So I think there are multiple reasons.
Silk, I don't know what the Chinese name for gi is, but the silk flowy robes is good.
Exactly. It's like, we'll do that.
No board shorts.
No. And I think that's part of the difference because technique-wise, you isolate. Like for me, having done a bunch of Chinese martial arts in the past, but having done mostly combat sports, there are techniques that I can isolate and pick that one technique that is a different way of moving maybe and use it in combat sports and it works like a charm. It's amazing. Not because Kung Fu is amazing, it's because that particular technique is great. And if you use it with a combat sport methodology, it's going to work great, So to me, there are little jewels to be picked there, but it's kind of like in UFC, before you had the Lyoto Machida of the world, most people think karate sucks. It just doesn't work. And then now there has been a bunch of people who can show that they can use it in a good way. You had, with many traditional martial arts, there are those things where it's not that the martial art is terrible, it's the way it's taught is terrible. It's the methodology is terrible, the training equipment is terrible, all of those things are what makes it not work.
Now, what's your knowledge of North American martial art systems?
I think
I'm talking here both
native.
Sort of the transplanted Anglo-Saxon martial arts and also the native North American martial arts. Yeah,
on the white guys version there was they wrestle a lot, and wrestle was a mix of wrestle boxing, but again, wrestle boxing we think of today as modern sports. The way they did it back then was a bit more free for all. There's these tales of, like, especially in the South, where they would do that a bunch. There was, I remember reading this tale of, they were having a couple of people on trial for getting into this nasty fight. One guy gouging somebody else's eyes out. And the entire jury, everybody had only one eye because it was common enough that it was like everybody did it to it. And it was wrestling, it was boxing, but not exactly very rule-oriented wrestling boxing. So it was, which is then where you get all the kind of catch wrestling tradition and even that's funny, right? You look at catch wrestling, you see super effective. And then because the technical matches between the top guys get boring and you want to sell tickets, then you start staging it and make it look cool in a way and then it become pro wrestling and stuff. You
have Shark and Goldfish, where you've got the long-time catch wrestler taking on the people visiting the carnival.
Exactly. It's like, what? Just hold my beer. Let me try against that guy, and totally. And you go, and that's another example where we were saying about Chinese martial art. Here you take something that's super effective, and if you dilute it enough in a different direction, then it becomes something else. That has nothing to do with it.
It becomes performance again with pro wrestling.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yes, we are officially saying pro wrestling is fake. Send your hate mail to somebody else.
But and the native stuff, I think it's interesting because you see the same stuff everywhere in the world. People wrestle and people hit each other. And wrestle, of course, being the safer of the two because you don't take as many blows to the head. But there were a lot of native cultures where there were these games where, in addition to the classic, and the wrestling, everyone has their different rules for how they do things. But then they would play games, like I was reading this whole thing about Lakota culture, or one of the common games was the... one was literally called the yank them by the hair and kick them in the face game.
Okay.
Which is always sound good, right?
How did that game work?
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's basically this, essentially they are gang fights where you hit no weapons, you just hit each other. Or one of the classic ones that they were good at was getting kids to fight on horses. And the whole game was you don't have weapons. Maybe you have like light sticks that you whack each other with. And then the goal is to throw somebody off the horse. Right. So they would arm drag each other to throw somebody off the horse, unbalance them, whack them with a stick to get them to move a certain way. Because, of course, if you spend your life on horseback, that's what's going to be the most useful thing. And
if you get unhorsed or dehorsed,
you're halfway gone. Yeah. Right. So things like that where some of them would be clearly, they were part of like, quote unquote children's game that you grow up in and you do that for fun, and then you become a badass warrior because that translates to you being able to stay on a horse anytime you want, and you get into a fight with somebody else who doesn't have the same drills, you throw them anytime you want, and that kind of thing.
I suppose the fact that many of the males in that culture would also have been hunters. I mean, there's probably not much better training for spearing somebody off a horse than spearing a buffalo from your horse.
Exactly.
It's pretty good training. It's kind of like a moving punching bag that could kill you.
Exactly. So it's like it translates to everything. You do these games that are going to make you better on a horse, are going to make you better as a hunter, they're going to make you better as a fighter. It's the whole for everything that you would do in that kind of culture.
Well, I don't know if it's possible to know now, but I would be astounded if the Mongols in the 12th century didn't have the similar practices.
Of course. Well, Mongolian wrestling is badass.
Yes.
That stuff is... and their top thing are archery from horseback. Wrestling. Those are the two big ones more than anything else.
Weird. And they're both sort of combat sports, and it's kind of like their national sports, and they almost took over the world at one point.
How did that work?
Weird.
Right?
I did train with a Mongolian wrestler once. I mean, he had competed in freestyle. But his style of wrestling was quite different. It had a very, very different flavor from the usual sort of North American Dan Gable-ish, single leg, double leg shoot.
Well, I believe if I remember correctly, Mongolian wrestling, you cannot touch your knee to the ground. You need to stay upright the entire time. So if you sacrifice throw, you lose. Okay. You cannot sacrifice throw somebody. It's all based on... It's kind of like that armor-based idea. We are in armor, I have to throw you and stick a spear through you. If I fall, doesn't matter if I throw you, I'm still on the ground. I don't want to be there.
Right. I'm trying to remember back if we ever did any technique. There was sort of a sacrificey type element to it. And it was so long ago, I can't remember, unfortunately. And if I had known this at the time, I would have paid more attention. But it really does show the culture of wrestling there. And... the importance of, inculcating this at a very young age. I mean, not surprisingly, many of the really, really good many of the people winning the Olympics in their 20s started training when they were, small children.
Really? How did that work? Yeah.
So you're not in your 20s.
Why would you make such an assumption?
Well, I say this with love in my heart, but if you're in your 20s and you've lived a very, very hard life.
Yeah. No, I just turned 43.
43. How has your training shifted as you've come into your late 30s?
Not a lot, to be honest. It's I don't feel that much difference physically, honestly. I mean, I hear people always talking about, this steady. I hear people who turn 30, they're like, I'm not the way I used to be. I'm like, really? I don't really feel any difference. I was never the most explosive, super fast or anything guy.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's the people who relied hugely on their athleticism.
That's maybe what's going on. Because, I was never like that crazy level of athleticism that then inevitably declines. So I don't really feel it. If anything, I feel like the last few years, there was a period where it was just, my body was just falling apart in every way, but it had nothing to do with age. It had everything to do with stress and life circumstances and just too much. So I couldn't, probably from the time I was about 36, 37, for the next 4 or 5 years was just, I would try to train, I would break down. I would try to train and I was just too stressed. It was like nothing was clicking. So I had a good chunk of time there where I wasn't really doing much. I was just trying to barely maintain and remember what vaguely I know. And then progressively got, 10 steps forward, 9 back. But slowly, sure enough, I started getting back to a point where I'm like, oh, I got a body again. It functions. It's nice. Oh, I remember what this is like. And now I do feel kind of like, I don't really feel any different than I was in my early 30s or something, so I'm just, or for that matter, I don't really feel it really. Again, my game, like if I do Jiu-Jitsu, is not a fast, explosive. It tends to be a slower, more control-driven game, but yeah, I mean, I may, and I'm telling you this, and by the way, I'm completely like stuck now in a position because just doing pull-ups yesterday, I yanked something in my back, so I bet there may be some wishful thinking here involved, but no.
If you say it enough times, it becomes true.
Exactly, right? No, but I feel, overall, I don't really feel the difference. I'm sure at some point I will, but right now I don't.
Have you started doing more physical conditioning, maybe? I think certainly for myself, as I chug through my 40s, I find that the physical conditioning is in some ways almost more important than the training because it keeps your body together in a way that allows you to train. So weight training, yes, it makes you stronger, which is always good.
Yeah. But
the main purpose really is to keep your joints tight and to, prevent injury. Yeah. So I find for myself anyway, and I've talked to other people who have very similar experiences, that the weight training, and we're including things like pull-ups and push-ups as weight training. You're struggling to move something heavy, is really critical for injury prevention.
Yeah, I never did weights in a heavy kind of way, but I always did my, at least once a week, hit the weights and just have a baseline of stuff that I never had like years where I wouldn't do it. So it's been something that I did from when I was a teenager to now. So I was never like super hardcore into it, but I always had that minimum regularity. And then things like pull-ups, I love it, right? If you have a bar in your house, every time you go through that door,
oh, you do that too?
Yeah, of course. It's like, it's awesome, right? Because you're not really doing a workout. You're not taking the time for, oh man, I don't have an hour and a half to work out today. But hey, I still got 60 pull-ups in today. That's a lot better than 0.
Yes, so something is better than nothing always.
So it's, I like that.
Okay. So when you were alluding to your stressful period in your life, you were still training. I mean, you know what? Why don't you, if you're okay, talk about that period and talk about how sort of the martial arts helped you through that, because you've written about that
of course.
Publicly. So
so basically, my daughter was born in 2009, so of course you take a little time off in terms of, I need to help with this newborn baby. You can also, but that was fine. That was just regular stuff.
Regular old sleep deprivation.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like, okay, I'm not going to be able to hit the gym as much. I am sleep deprived, but whatever, not a big deal. In the latter part of 2010, my wife started getting sick, and initially we couldn't figure out what it was, but it very quickly became obvious that it was something big, and initially they thought it was multiple sclerosis, which sucks in itself, but that's treatable, that you can live with it. Turns out no, brain tumor that killed her in a span of 6 months from the time she saw the first symptom to death. It was a super quick process, which in some way, it's hard to tell because those things are horrible no matter what, but in some way almost better than not, because you don't want to, if you are going out anyway and you are slowly fading away, I don't know if slowly is better than fast at that point, but in any case, so the whole process was really quick. By the time she died, she died. My daughter at that point was only 19 months old, so, now it's all on me to take care of her. My job was going to crap because stuff that I thought where my career path was going, it became obvious right at that time that it wasn't going to happen. And so certain doors that I thought would open didn't. As a result of that, It was hard to be able to hold on to my house. We had a mortgage. There was no way we could keep it. All of these happened in the span of like 3 months. So it was just like, shit, okay, now what? And it was weird because I couldn't really, this is why also I think that the next few years I paid a price physically, because I couldn't really open that door emotionally much. I mean, I would give myself my 10 minutes a day to feel something and get hit by the enormity of it all. Mm-hmm. But then I would very quickly close that door because the idea was...
You have to take care of your dog.
Yeah, exactly. I still need to wake up, change diapers, do this, do that. And not only the practical stuff, because I mean, yeah, of course you need to take care of her in that sense, but also you need to take care of her emotionally, which means that you have to wake up with a smile on your face to make her happy. Because, she's like, she has enough stuff to deal with. Suddenly her mom disappeared. That's kind of a big deal in an infant life. She needs all the happiness she can use, and I need to make it happen whether I feel like it or not. That's completely, nobody cares that you don't feel like smiling. You still need to make it happen. You need to still find a way to be, and because you can't fake it, because otherwise, babies will feel it, and you need to honestly try to focus on the stuff that would make life good anyway in a scenario that's anything but good.
You need to sincerely fake it.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas find something to be happy about right now, because that's the difference. Now, of course, the problem with that method is while it works wonders in the short run, clearly leaves some stuff, you're not dealing with emotional issues. They're still going to come back to bite you in the ass. It's not that they are gone forever and somehow you can just be this completely cold machine that... So I started developing 3 gazillion psychosomatic issues. And I always thought, this is it's weird because the symptoms are real, but the cause is not physical. The cause starts from the mind, mm-hmm. And then the mind affects the body, and then all the symptoms will mess you up. But the solution is not in chasing the symptoms. The solution is addressing the emotional causes underneath, or at least that's what was going on for me. So, but I think back to the martial art aspect, one of the things that helped me the most was that, we all like in martial arts the empowerment moments when you pull the perfect armbar, when you are this undefeatable fighting machine. Who doesn't like it, right? It's awesome. It feels good. For me, the most important thing was more the getting my ass kicked part of martial arts.
Really?
In the sense that, when things don't go our way, when you have somebody who's 10 times better than you squashing you, the natural thing for our ego, for our body, for everything, the natural thing is, I don't like this. I want out of here. Mm. Let me get the hell out of this. This does not feel good. This is not what I signed up for. I wanted to be the god of war and the fighting machine. This is not it. This is me getting my ass kicked is not it. Mm. But if you stay in it, and it does something to your brain, because everybody can stay in a fight that they believe they can win. It's a lot harder to stay in a fight that you're absolutely sure you're going to lose. Staying in an hopeless fight and yet keeping up and fighting your heart out anyway, that takes a peculiar kind of thing that martial arts will develop, because there are going to be a million times when you are getting your ass kicked by somebody better. And I guess, you have the option to go home and not train, but that's not really how you grow, how you learn technically even. So for me, that was important, because in this scenario, it was an hopeless fight. It was a scenario where when my wife is dying and it's becoming clear that there's nothing I can do about it, she's not dead yet. So I still need to figure out a way to spend the next 2 weeks, month, 2 months in a happy kind of way. Mm-hmm. She needs, I can't save her, but I can try to make her days happier or crappier. If I'm feeling all crushed and defeated and I feel like this sucks, I want out, that's not going to help her. It's not going to help me or anybody, right? So to be able to be in a situation where we are going to quote unquote lose, right? We are going to get crushed. There's no alternative there, but we can still laugh along the way. That's something that in a lot of ways martial arts helped me with, because that ability to just stay in it when you're getting your ass kicked.
And your goal going from winning to losing a little bit less badly.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to lose. Let's have a good time anyway. Mm-hmm. And I've had exactly Like I had a couple, like in MMA smokers, I remember once getting my mindset being so horrible where nothing happened. I went for a takedown on this guy. He sprawled. I pulled half guard. I swept him, caught him in a leg lock. I think I have it. And the guy got out and got to side mount. So still completely and I tap because I didn't like where he was going. Mm-hmm. And to me, that moment, I was like, oh my God, seriously, you tap on nothing? You tap because you don't like, because you're tired, because you don't like where the fight is going. If there's such a thing as fighting spirit, what you just demonstrated is the exact opposite of it. That's like and so a couple of smokers later, I had similar dynamics. We are one round apiece going into the third. I'm so that tired that I can't even stand anymore. And I remember being in there thinking, what am I doing here? I don't want to be here. This sucks. This is too much. And I picture the image of me just saying, okay, I'm done, walking home, and then seeing my wife and saying like, oh, what happened? Oh, yeah, I lost. Why? Oh, because I was tired. I just gave up. And then I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that again. That sucks. That just makes me feel like the worst human being in the world. So I kind of stuck with it. That fight was an ugly fight. There was nothing pretty about it. But staying with it till the end, until I gave everything I had and more, that's probably the one that I'm the most proud of, even though technically it wasn't, because it was about that willpower. It's like, no, there's no quit. I don't care. You win, you lose, that's secondary. The guy's better than you, you lose. The guy's worse, you'll win. That's out of your control. But stay in it, that's within your control. And that's what I want to see.
So the Daniele from the previous fight came back and bitch slapped the Daniele in that fight.
Exactly.
And
it was
you
just
stayed with it.
That image, like I remember what that felt like. It did not feel good. I don't like being that person, so I'm not going to be that person this time.
Okay.
And knowing that is in me, right? That option is in me. The kind of wimpy, more cowardly, let me get out. It is part of who I am. And then there's another side, and it's like, where am I going to put my energy? Which one I'm going to feed, so to speak? That's going to make a difference. And because I'm sure there are people who are naturally tougher than others, but nobody's born 100% tough and fearless. Right. There's something weird if you are,
Well, you could be a complete psychopath.
Exactly. But, there are issues there. Yeah. So it's like, those things are things you develop through exposure. You just do it in manageable amounts, because if you do too much too soon, it's kind of like lifting weights. If you lift too much, that's not going to make you strong.
Hey, welcome to the gym, and here's your 1,000-pound deadlift, and never come back.
Exactly. So you do a little bit, and then next time a little more, and then in time it does make you tougher.
So this is so funny, because we've gone from sort of your historian aspect to beating the crap out of somebody in an MMA smoker. So talk a little bit about did the people in your academic environment know about the MMA stuff?
I don't really fit extremely well in academia, because I love my students. They like me. But that is because I think I'm a human being, whereas most people who teach are, I don't know what they are, but something else. It was funny because I remember there were a few times when it became obvious that despite me being polite and trying to be nice, I wasn't fitting super well within a certain academic culture. And I remember being in my office, being all bummed out. I'm like, but why? Why don't they like me? And then I look from the outside. I kind of get a picture from the outside, and I'm sitting there in my office listening to Eminem. I have the renewal of my medical marijuana license in my hand. They have these boxing gloves hanging from my neck that I just finished sparring with a student during a class break with. It's like, yeah, I wonder why they don't like me. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's like, come on, man. It's a different... But no, for the most part, most people are cool. We come from different worlds in that sense, but that's fine. For me, it's important because it's the duality of it all. If you are the tough, super athletic guy, read some poetry. If you are the guy who spend time with their heads in the books, get out, work out.
Sweat, bleed, something.
You need it all, right? Yeah. It's kind of that basic yin yang of life. You need all of it, not one or the other.
So there was a little bit of pushback maybe in the academic setting because of the MMA thing. Is there pushback now because of the podcasting thing? Or is there the sense that you can only be an academic if you publish in refereed articles in proper journals, and that this podcasting thing is a fad and it's going to go away?
Those are the rules of the game. It's like in terms of if you want to get a career I think I carved myself a niche that now I realize is good for me, which is teaching part-time at a few places. So I'm actually teaching more than full-time in terms of hours, but I don't have the perks of being a full-timer in one place. But that's probably fine, because being a full-timer in one place, you are required to hit how many journals have you published in, how many... And I honestly don't speak I've tried, I swear, I try to play a little academic game, and I can't do it. I don't think the way their language is funny, because I enjoy communication so much. And when people start going in an academic lingo, I have no idea what they are saying. It's just, to me, that's not even human communication anymore. So I don't care about it. They clearly... I think the podcasting thing is tolerated as a cool curiosity, and some people may even like it, as long as you don't present yourself as, I want your job kind of thing. I want to be at the top of academia. Then it's tolerated a little more as an eccentric curiosity. But otherwise, I've been in history department meetings where nobody in the room has any idea who somebody like Dan Carlin is, who has the biggest podcast in the world when it comes to history. He does hardcore history. He's brilliant.
You're really saying that nobody in the... Yeah. This is in the history department.
Yeah, and they have no idea who Dan Carlin is. And that's probably the number one guy in the world in terms of popularizing history, letting people know, telling it in a way that people actually care about. And it's off the radar. They don't even know who the guy is. And
it's so pedestrian, these people.
And I'm just like, wow, man. And no wonder, Dan is a guy who always say, oh, I'm not a real historian, I'm this.
That's a very clever line. Yeah. I'm a fan of history, I'm not a real historian.
But that what actually makes you good at telling history. Because most of the real historians are so trapped into these minutiae of
the metallurgical content of coins during the late Roman era.
Exactly, where nobody cares. There's no story there. As humans, we care about powerful stories. That's what hooks you in. Dan is a master storyteller, and he'll read all these books, so he knows the research done by other historians. So he needs that. Those guys are super useful because they provide raw material from which Dan will be able to tell a story. But somehow history and most academic fields have gone in a super specialized direction where you become the one that mine all the facts out, but after you dug up all this gold, you don't know what to do with it. Because you can't tell a story, because you're not a storyteller. And I think that's fine, but at least know what's out there, know what people actually enjoy of the work you're doing.
I think sort of the precursor to what Dan Carlin does, and to what you do as well, make no mistake, you're telling fantastic stories as well. Sort of that big picture story. Maybe people like Will Durant from a long time ago. Maybe it was acceptable to focus on, the big picture of history as opposed to the ratio of lead to gold in silver coins of the northeast region of Byzantium or whatever.
I like that. So that's you could do an academic. That's a PhD, right?
Oh, that's a PhD. Oh, awesome.
Not that anybody would read it.
No,
but
it's almost a point of pride that nobody would read it. I want to pick something that's so obscure.
Yep.
My background was biology and botany.
Right.
So it would be a very big career. It would be re-entry into the academic circles, and I pulled the pin at a master's. It's like I'm done. Thank you. It's been good. I worked so hard in my undergraduate. I worked like a son of a bitch. And then by the time I got to my master's, I spent as much time training and kayaking or whitewater canoeing as I did on my master's. I told myself I was doing a joint thing between the biology department and the geography department, and that the people in those departments would just assume that I was over in the other department when in fact I was out on the river. I don't know if I fooled anybody at all.
Hey, you got your master's. That's good.
Yeah, and then I bravely ran away
from it. I like that. But, I think it's healthy. Yeah, because it's too diverse from life. They take something that's great, that could be good for life, and they stripped the life aspect of it. And I think you're right. It's more modern stuff. It became, I think a lot of the social sciences got obsessed with the idea that you have to be a real science, that we are a real science. And in order to do that, you strip all the human element, the subjective element. But that's the interesting stuff. That's what make what you do interesting.
So here we're talking anthropology, sociology, history, those types of fields.
Exactly. Where then they became, that's why you don't do the Will Durant kind of history anymore. You have, really, I think all the best history books I've ever read, they're not written by historians. They're written by journalists or by who have read a ton of history. And then they put it into human language and they put it in a good storytelling framework.
Well, journalists are good at doing that. I remember going through a phase reading a ton of mountaineering books by Chris Bonington and all those guys. And they were interesting, but they were written by mountaineers who are not journalists. And then along comes John Krakauer with Into Thin Air and writes a human book and just explodes that field of, now how many books about that one tragedy on Mount Everest have been written? Quick, there's been a tragedy on some mountain somewhere in northern Pakistan. Send the journalists.
It makes all the difference. Knowing, I think as humans, we like stories. When you watch movies, it's about storytelling. When you listen to podcasts, good ones are about good storytelling. For me, in fact, I realize everything I do is about that. Whether I'm teaching in class is storytelling, podcasting storytelling. When I write books, it's all about the same stuff.
How long does it take you to get ready for a podcast series?
A lot. Like the history ones are monstrously, History on Fire takes an insane amount of time. Like on average, and again, it's hard to estimate exactly, but like a single episode is probably about 200 hours of research.
So roughly 100 to 1 ratio of research and you're already immersed in the field in general of history.
Yeah, because you find, you read the giant 600-page book, then you have to take all the notes on it, then compare those notes with the next 600-page book you read, and the next, and the next, and the next, and then you need to put it together in a cohesive storyline, and then add the elements that make people care. It's a bunch of work.
Oh, I bet.
It's awesome when you're done. It's also when you start, because you have the excitement of this is going to be fun. I can't wait to dig into this topic. And it's also when you're done, when you look back, I'm like, man, that's a great story.
There's a dark night of the soul, a very long dark night of the soul in between.
Man, I just prepare now this series that luckily is going to give me 4 months because it's going to be a 4-part series, but about the Spaniards invading ancient Mexico. Okay. So it's Aztecs against Spaniards kind of story. Jesus, ended up with 50 pages of single space notes, probably 30,000 words on this story and those are just notes. I'm just like, wow, that was a lot of stuff. There was a moment there I was like, is there ever an end to this thing? Is it so now it feels good to be done. All I have to do is record, which is going to be the easy part.
I'm really looking forward to that one because, of course, the conventional story is that, 100 Spaniards marched in and destroyed an empire.
Yeah, no.
But I went down a little rabbit hole on Wikipedia a couple of months ago and realized, there's a lot more to this story. Yeah. So it's fantastic. This is synchronicity.
It's perfect. That's coming up.
I've just learned enough to know how confused I am by it. So
no, and in fact, I think that happens to me in research. There's a bunch of times when you start, it's exciting. Then you get to book 2 or 3 and it's really confusing because you're like, okay, now I'm losing tracks of too many pieces. And then by the end, they all fit together. They're like, okay, now I get it. Now I get where everything fits in. But there's a stage there where knowing more makes you feel like you know less. And you pass that, and then it starts clicking a little.
Well, to bring that back to the martial arts analogy, which seems to underlie all of this, if you're, if you're playing De La Riva guard mostly, and you decide, you know what, I really want to try out this spider guard, you're going to take a step back, not a step forward. Yeah, you're going to start getting smashed by the people. I remember a friend of mine coming back from Marcelo Garcia's academy in New York, and he wanted to try out all this stuff. And normally it's pretty competitive between us. And this day, I just smashed him.
Of course.
Because he was trying out new stuff. So he'd learned more, and now he's incorporated, and now he's incredibly difficult to beat. And so it was the dip between the accumulation of the knowledge and the incorporation of the knowledge into your game. So it sounds like that.
Sense. That's the same thing, really.
It's probably really, really boring for non-martial artists to listen to martial artists try and relate everything back to martial arts. It's just like when you're in S-mount and you've got the arm here.
Yeah, but my guess is that your audience is enjoying the martial art talk, so it's all good.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, and if they don't like it with a podcast, they can go to the next one.
Yeah, you get your money back.
Yeah. You get all the money that you've paid here. So, are there any podcast topics for your History on Fire show that you want to get to, that you're kind of holding off for, like, okay, I'm going to need, this is when I get fired from all my jobs and become independently wealthy and I can spend a year. Is it like the big Mount Everest that you want to tackle?
I think I don't feel that there's anything that's so much more difficult than what I've already done that's require I would have to have a special circumstance. But there are topics that I can't wait to get in. There's, after I get done, the Spanish Aztec series will probably be done by the end of summer. So we're talking kind of late 2017. I badly want to start researching now Jack Johnson, not the musician, the heavyweight boxer. Mm-hmm. First black heavyweight champion in the early 1900s. His story is just awesome. He's one of those characters who's
he drove the white people crazy.
And interesting enough, he even drove quite a few black people crazy. Because his thing was, and that's what I like about this story, that is not just the story of the tough black guy who challenged the white supremacy of the day. Mm-hmm. For sure it's that story, right? But at the same time, there were all the Booker T. Washington kind of folks where we need to become, we need to show the white people that we are respectable black folks, that we walk just as hard as anybody else, that we do this and that. And he hated Jack Johnson because Jack Johnson was like, yeah, I'm not your role model. I like to drink, I like hookers, and I like to fight. And just leave me the hell alone. I'm not
your poster boy.
No, I'm not having white people tell me how to live. I'm not having black people tell me how to live. I'm going to live however I want to live. So just back off. I'm not your poster boy. I'm not. And I dig that about him. The fact that he was just very much about living life on his own terms.
I saw a clip there's some footage of him fighting, I think. And the footage, he was tall, and he was fighting this short white guy. Yeah. And the white guy was running in close and then jumping up into the air, trying to headbutt him.
Yeah, I've seen that,
repeatedly. Yeah. And we're talking like, it's been a while since I saw it, maybe like 5 or 10 times in a row, and the referee's just completely ignoring it. It's like flying headbutt attacks.
Well, 1905 or whatever that was, the rules of boxing were way more permissive. I mean, for one, they would let you stay in the clinch forever. They wouldn't really separate you much. You could spend a whole fight in the clinch. Jack Johnson, that's kind of half of what he did, is he would just bicep control from the clinch. And then from here, he would just move to the side, uppercut them, hit them, and go back to bicep control. Okay. So he played a game where he wouldn't take damage.
It would fit in MMA.
It would totally fit in MMA. And it was designed it's like the Jujutsu of boxing. Rather than we stand 2 feet apart and trade punches.
Right.
I'm gonna just use my weight against your body in such a way that I can hit you and you can't hit me. Okay. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I dig that model. But he's funny, man. It's like when he finally got to fight the guys who have been running away their whole life, hiding behind, I'm the white champion, I don't fight black guys. There's one of them where he knocks this guy out multiple times, and every time this guy is fall, because you can only knock out somebody once, right? No, because every time this guy is falling, he catches him, he holds him, he's like, let him come back too, because he wants to hit him again. He's like, no, I'm not done with you. We're spending a few more rounds with this. It's just ridiculous.
Is there footage of that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Those
wow.
fights are...
Wow. I think, didn't Ali do that? I think he carried some guys...
Maybe he did do that. I know Ali used Jack Johnson as a role model a lot.
Really?
You can see a lot of similarities there in their personality, in their larger-than-life attitude.
Yeah, not only am I going to be black, not only, I think I'll become a Muslim too.
Yeah.
Screw y'all.
Let's do it. Yeah. Whereas the Joe Lewis on the war, they always played very subdued. It's like, I'm gonna go in and be a great fighter, but I'm gonna be very mellow outside and not challenge anything, the social convention. That's not Jack Johnson.
Okay. Awesome.
So
I'm really looking for it. And honestly, people, go check out History on Fire. It's really good. Your books. What books have you written sort of for public consumption, not the metallurgical content of
I've never done it. I can't do
I'm so disappointed in you.
Can't do the... I tried at one point to do... I got 2 masters, but I tried at one point to do a PhD, and I just could not because my advisor was a very nice person who got back to me with comments, and I had no idea what he said. He would be like, oh, that's great, but you should also... And everything after, but you should also... I was just like, I'm sorry, man, I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth. It's just not... But no, the ones I've done are... the main ones, I've done 4. I think 3 are the bigger ones. There's On the Warrior's Path, the first one I've done, that's kind of about philosophy and martial arts. I did one called Create Your Own Religion, that's sort of applying the Bruce Lee idea of take the best from different systems rather than to martial arts. In this case, applying it to philosophy/religion, kind of make up your own way of life, what makes sense to you, not just take it because somebody else tells you is a good idea. And then the third one, Not Afraid, is more of a narrative thing about, it's more personal, it's somewhat autobiographical about my journey into martial arts, story about my wife, life afterwards. That's the latest one I've done. I think I'm done with non-fiction. I think my plan is if I ever manage to find the time again, I would like to start writing fiction.
Really?
Yeah, because I figure I'm doing the research anyway for the history. I want to do historical fiction. Like the book that I badly want to write now is, I did 2 episodes on Caravaggio, the Italian painter. His life story is so badass. It's so great. I want to kind of...
Painter, brawler, fighter,
exactly.
Soldier.
Kill the guy in a duel, run away from the police. Yeah. As I put it sometimes when I have to explain it quickly, is picture Tupac, if Tupac was a painter rather than a rapper and lived in Italy in the 1600s rather than... But yeah, that's what I would like to do. I want to start writing just stories.
That's have you dipped your pen into the fiction? Talk about a tortured metaphor. Have you started writing any fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a screenplay.
Well, we are in LA.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have done.
But your screenplays, especially with a historical bent. Was it a historical screenplay?
Yeah. It was about the same series that I'm doing right now for History on Fire. The whole Little Big Horn, Lakota versus US. It's a hard sell because Hollywood is kind of scared of topics that have to do with Native Americans.
Right.
Because there are not enough Native Americans to be a target audience. They fear that white people will be freaked out about the less pleasant past of the American past. So that's always a little bit of a hard...
fear of cultural appropriation and all that.
Yeah. So it's complicated. It takes, they do One Dances with Wolves, then for 5 years they do 10 million Indian movies, but then other than that, it's kind of hard to... But I had a blast with that one. I'm even... Like, I have notes for books that I want to write, sometimes super extensive dialogues, everything already there. So I feel good with it. I feel like, I can do this. So I'm kind of looking forward to carving some time for myself to get it done.
So in addition to all the research, the teaching, the podcasting, you're also training people.
Yeah. Well, people is a big word. Is one person. Now, my girlfriend, who's actually the producer and editor of History on Fire, but beside being, she's so funny because she's this mellow artist who's all like drawing this cool art, helping me with the podcast. And then she started fighting professionally in MMA, and it's, she has a whole thing called, like her nickname for fight. It's the Savage Buddha, which fits perfectly for her because she's so mellow outside. Like you meet her, she's this soft-spoken, smiling, sweet woman, never get mad at anything. And then you get her into a cage and she's a complete savage. Just, she had her first fight in December, and
I saw it. It wasn't very long.
No.
And she won.
18 seconds, and the poor lady on the other end of that fight was out for a minute. Just out. I mean, you see in MMA, female MMA in particular, you see people being powerful with kicks. They can knock you out with kicks. Punches usually is it's kind of punches in bunches that get the ref to step in as a TKO.
Yeah.
That was just a one-punch KO where it just...
One-punch KOs in female MMA are really rare.
You do not see that.
I'm trying to think.
That's where the guy who helped us hook up the match and make it happen, his eyes just started... They were like in the dollar sign after that because he was like, oh, nobody punches like that in female MMA. So we got something here. Now...
And then she fought again recently.
Yeah, she had her second fight, and that was also like a minute 20.
Tell the story, because that was a gong show, really.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, because the entry level of MMA is the Far West, right? And I don't even mind. People got all pissed off, like, oh, it's not
professional enough.
What do you want? You're entering a field, and so I'm completely comfortable with the Far West of it all. Indian reservation, no commission, that kind of thing. This one, they 3 days before, after she's been killing herself to cut weight for 2 months, she's within target of making weight, and they say, oh, sorry, your opponent ended up in jail. He's not going to make bail by fight time, so we have to find somebody else. Next one was like, oh, we found somebody, but just found out she's pregnant. Doesn't work. So we have... Third opponent is like, she's going to be a little heavier than you, so we'll have to kind of, you tell me if you're open to just do almost an open weight kind of thing, because we can't really get you the person. Like, what are we talking about? She's probably 10, 15 pounds heavier than you. Like, okay, we can do that. She doesn't have as much experience, so we can... By fight time, we see this lady, she's probably 40 pounds heavier than her. And she wasn't particularly technical or anything, but she was big and tough. She could take a punch and didn't care. So it took a good minute and a half to get into it. And eventually then she got giant knees in, and this lady decided it looked better on TV.
Savannah got giant knees in,
and she finished by TKO, but that was an interesting experience.
It's kind of like the old Pride fights with the giant size discrepancies.
No, it's exactly like that. And again, I don't mind at all. I think it's, there's some, part of the issue to me is that anytime people start in MMA, if you play it in a pure sport, let's match everybody who's even, every single fight you fight is a fight to the death against somebody who's as skilled as you are. And you don't get to try stuff. Like, I mean, on the surface, like, she's 2-0, both of her fights finish in the first round with strikes. Great, right? But there are, little things that are like, okay, in that moment when you threw that kick, you drop your hands. Somebody better than your opponent would have knocked your head off with that one. So let's work on... You don't want to make that mistake against somebody who will take your head off, because there's no learning curve, know? So to me, I kind of like the way they do it in boxing, where they slowly build you up. You start against people who are, if you lose against them, you have no business being in fighting. Then you go one level up, then you go very slowly. You have time to... I was looking at the record of Valentina Shevchenko, who's now fighting for the UFC title. Man, somebody really managed her well, because all her first 10 fights are against people who are like 0-5, 0-2, 0... like, people who have no chance against them.
The ultimate tomato can lineup.
And that's the idea. And one time she went a little too far, too quick, she immediately lost. And they promptly put her back against other cans for a few more. They gave her like 10, 12, 13 fights that were just to develop her. Give her 3-4 years.
Sort of like a really hard sparring session with an extra dose of adrenaline.
Exactly. Against somebody that you'll probably, if you lose against them, then you shouldn't go forward.
So what you're talking about here is the optimal way to manage your fighter, not the optimal way for every fighter to come up, because there is no way that everybody could do this all at once.
I think what happens at the low level pro is that there are a lot of people who are tough, and they are used to fighting they are street fighters. They have a little training. They know what they are doing, and they are like, what? You're going to pay me to go in and fight? Hell, I do it on a Saturday night for fun anyway. So you kidding me? This is great. And they kind of they get their money. It works. The other person got the experience. It works. I think a lot of the time in MMA, they throw you too fast into the deep end of the pool, and you have no chance to grow as a fighter.
Because now every fight, as you said, is a fight to the death, and if you try one new thing and it doesn't work, you're dead.
Exactly. And so I like this because to me it's like we saw what's really good about Savannah's game. She has a crazy punching power that pretty much no one in female MMA has, but she has 3,000 things to work on. You know, It's like, okay, let's play your wrestling a little more. Your wrestling kind of sucks. So you need to do this. You know, you don't want to find out against somebody who's a monster. They are lacking these things. You want to say, okay, you have all these things that are great. Now we're going to work on building them up. And so, but yeah, that's where it's going. It's been so weird for me because anytime somebody else you care about is going to fight, you get really worked up. And seeing her literally taking a nap right before a fight, being so calm about it, is freaking.
How long before a fight?
Like an hour before a fight. An hour before a fight, she was napping in the van and then got out. It's like, oh, it's time to start wrapping your hands and okay, ready to go. Let's warm up and let's go.
Whereas you're walking in tight little circles and...
Yeah, I don't sleep for days and I'm all worked up and she's just ridiculously zen about it.
The Savage Buddha. There you go.
Indeed.
All right. Well, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck with your podcast. Good luck with your training. Good luck with your writing. Good luck with your screenplay. Good luck with your time management, especially.
That's a big one.
There. Forget everything else I said before. Just good luck with your time management.
That's the fight that I always lose.
Well, ultimately, does anybody ever get everything they want to get done? So
True.
We're going to go down and try and lose a little bit less. Awesome.
I like that. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Podcast listeners, if you found this interesting or useful or entertaining, please pass this episode on to somebody else in your social circle or in your training circle. Surely there's somebody else out there who would also find it interesting. This is the way the podcast grows. It's an organic growth by people like you passing it on to their friends and the people that they know. I really, really appreciate this kind of sharing. So thank you so much in advance and good luck with your training.